Us for our RDA meeting of the Board of Directors. We appreciate having you with us. We will get started, and we would like to excuse Director Penfold today, but happy to have everyone else here on board. Many of us were out of town last week at a very useful conference on ending homelessness. Not something that comes up in our city very often, but we thought it might be worth learning a few things. So we appreciate having everyone here. I will begin with asking for comments to the board, and I have one card if anyone else would like to share any comments, and it is from George Chapman. George, would you please come forward and share your thoughts? And 2 minutes.
Right. Okay, I want to thank you very, very much for rescuing the storage facility from demolition. I'd appreciate it if you try to work a little harder to make sure we don't have these pictures of people with great big cartloads of belongings that are wandering around trying to escape the bulldozers, and that will require a bigger storage facility and also 24-hour service. The problem right now is people that want to work will not work because they think they have to stay there and protect their belongings. If they have a 24-hour secure facility, they're more likely to actually try to find a job. And right now they won't unless they have a 24-hour secure facility. And right now it's full. So thank you for rescuing it. But I also want to comment about the market. We have the biggest open-air drug market in the Western United States, and that's not saying much about Salt Lake City. So I think we're jumping the gun on the public market discussion. If anything, I think an area around 300 West to Main Street would be more appropriate for a market, and I think that's where you should be looking to put a market. But that's my opinion, and thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chapman. We appreciate your input. I now would look for approval of minutes for Tuesday, April 11th, 2017, Tuesday, May 16, 2017, Tuesday, May 30th, 2017, Tuesday, June 6th, 2017, and Tuesday, June 13th, 2017.
I'll move approval.
Board Member Mendenhall has moved to approve the minutes.
Second.
And a second by Board Member Johnston. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. And board members, if I would like to invite you to be sure, and I don't know how you are about checking the minutes. If I know I said a lot, which sometimes I tend to do a little too much, I like to go back and make sure it was right in the minutes, and they do a great job actually of getting it right, or that my intent, or so that I can clarify things. But one of the things that is really beneficial is our recorder's office makes sure that they bold questions that we've asked and straw polls that we've done. And I find it helpful to go through and take notes on those things. And then I think it's appropriate for us to, in writing, ask the RDA staff and our staff where we are on the follow-up. Because I never want to put anyone on the spot publicly to say, hey, have you done this? I saw it in the minutes. So I would encourage you to take notes of that type of thing and make sure questions you've asked that there is follow-up on that. And with that, we look forward to hearing our first report on the public market draft feasibility study and development plan. We've looked forward to this for a long time. Those who are reporting on this, if you'll join us at the table, that would be great. And it's Jennifer Bruno and Benjamin Lutke and Lara Fritz. And Lara, we will ask you in a moment to introduce our guest. I personally, I'm a little disappointed that a year out, this is the first time we're getting to see a draft, but I'm delighted that today's the day and that we get to see it. And in the normal course of business, we look at multiple drafts, so this is nothing's going to happen in terms of funding or saying, yeah, we're ready to adopt this at this point, because we still have a lot of questions, and that's why we get a first draft. And we appreciate your willingness to take the time to share it with us. So with that, I'll turn it over to Lara to introduce our guests, and then Jennifer.
Maybe I'll just make
Oh,
a quick
okay,
comment.
great. Yeah,
Sorry,
yeah,
that way
please do, yeah.
she can just continue. But
Yeah.
just to kind of frame it a little bit, our staff has reviewed the draft as it is now and raised a number of questions that the administration will work through with the consultant. Those are the questions that were included in the packet. There was, I think, some different ideas about how far along this draft is in the community and in the city staff. So we've confirmed with the administration that we're earlier in the draft phase than later. So there's still, as Board Member Adams said, quite a bit of work to be done. And the RDA staff is committed to doing that with the consultant. So with that, I'll turn it over to Laura.
Thank you.
Thank you, board members. It's always a pleasure to be in front of you. So today what we thought we could do is spend a little time talking through what we sort of see as three parts to the public market analysis. The first is what I'm going to deem the market study for the public market, which is really awkward to say, but it's really the supply, demand, talking through the survey that was done of people who participate in our market, who shop in our city. I think that would be really beneficial. The second thing we want to share with you today is the fit study, showing you how it could potentially fit on a site that the RDA owns over in Station Center, and talk through some different concepts and ideas that we had not only originally presented within the draft document, but also some concepts that we heard today that we'd like to include moving forward. The one area that we're not going to spend a lot of time on today is the pro forma. And part of the reason why is because we did, thanks to your outstanding council staff, find a fairly large error. That error, unfortunately, drives a lot of the conversation within the report. So I will own that I missed the mistake, and kudos to your staff for finding it. With that being said, what we'd like to do is go back, spend a little bit more time on that financial analysis, and incorporate a couple of things, some various models that we heard today. We want to look at how we can better allow for options for you, because right now the way that the document lays out is there's kind of one option. So what we want to do is present various options for the board's conversation. So with that, I'd like to introduce Ted Spitzer and Jesse Allen, who are part of the consultant team. And they're going to provide you with a historic overview. As you know, that this has been a project we've done in great partnership with Allison from the Urban Food Connections and Jason Mathis from the Downtown Alliance, who are also in the audience today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jesse to sort of do a quick reminder of how we got here today.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That might be better.
Could we just switch spots real quick and then we'll switch back? Okay. This is a timeline that we put together with RDA staff representing the process that has taken place so far. GSBS Architects has only been involved in the very last portion of this, so I'm not able to speak to every detail along the way, but as I understand from RDA staff, this is the process that has taken place. So if I zoom in here, back in 1998, there was the Gateway Master Plan. This is a plan for the area that will eventually include the Depot District. This is before it became the Depot District. These are all plans that mention the public market to some degree. Also in 98, there was the Depot District Redevelopment Project Area Plan. This is a policy document that established the objectives to guide the redevelopment activities. In 2005, there was the Central Community Land Use Plan, which is a progression really of this Gateway Master Plan. And then we get into more specifics. The Downtown Rising Vision is a consensus-based plan that did call for a year-round public market in Depot District to build upon the success of the farmers market in Pioneer Park. Also in 2007, there was a feasibility study by Market Ventures, Ted Spitzer, that concluded the public market can be supported in Salt Lake City to some degree. And then in 2011, there was a site study done also by Market Ventures that concluded that the Rio Grande Depot or the RDA adjacent property could be the location for the public market. So that was in 2011. In 2014, the RDA adopted the site plan for Station Center. And then in 2016, it was determined that Parcel 5 was determined as an important, let's see. Yeah, I believe in 2016, there it is, I'm sorry. In 2016, the RDA and the Downtown Alliance site selection. So Parcel 5 was adopted by the RDA as the public market location, at least at a master plan level. The Downtown Community Plan identifies Station Center as the ideal location for a year-round market, and then brings us up to, the future, or the today, where we have the current feasibility study done by GSBS Architects and Market Ventures, showing how that can lay out on Parcel 5. Are there any questions regarding that timeline or anything that I said?
I have a question, but board members, do any of you ahead of me? You get to ask first. Go ahead, Erin.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Back to the 2007 study that I believe some of you conducted. That was before my time, and although it's a part of the access here, can you give me a brief definition of what supported means or meant in the context of that study, that to say that a market, an indoor year-round public market can be supported by the city?
So I'll have to, is it on? Can you?
The red button on the bottom.
Sometimes it's really quiet and you just have to rock star.
I think it's there. So I don't recall all the details because it was 10 years ago. But we went through a process of looking at where customers might come from. We looked at demographic analysis of the area. We looked at models from other cities of similar scale. We interviewed and did a bunch of research with potential vendors for the market. We looked at a lot of different locations around the city where the market could be located. Again, there was, I think, as I recall, a sense that an economic model could be created, where the market could break even on an operational basis if it was, in a good site. So it was a little bit more abstract than the level of detail that we have done with the current study, which I'll go through in a minute.
And that economical model that could be created sounds like the market would be a piece of that economical model that probably included some other drivers in the area, or was that model internal to the market itself?
At the time, I do not believe it was part of a mixed-use project. It was a standalone concept.
Okay,
And
I will
just
dig deeper.
A
then.
little piece of clarification, and I think we discussed it earlier today, was that the market would be operationally feasible, but would not support payment on capital that was borrowed to build the market at the time. So at the time, it was acknowledged that it couldn't support the cash flow to build the market on its own, but once built, it could operate within a building. It would be operational.
Thank you, and thank you.
And my question was, what made you all decide to not pursue Rio Grande when the Rio Grande station was identified as a good choice?
There certainly are some positive elements of the Rio Grande building, but we've outlined it in a report. It's much smaller, so it would not meet the opportunity that we think that a larger market could have. There's some significant costs associated with upgrading, particularly with seismic issues with that building. And there's some branding issues that you can't alter many things with the historic building, so making it feel like a retail location, not like what it is, a station, would be challenging. So I think there is a model that one could create that would work. It would not be as impactful or can meet the demand that we saw.
Okay, thanks. I think thanks to the Downtown Alliance, we saw a redo of an old building in San Francisco that worked really, really well. So I I don't buy that you can't make it work in an old building, but I understand the size of it and the small side. The other question, on the 2007 plan or study, that's been 10 years ago. So do we think that the things that held true then hold true now? We had a recession between now and then.
No.
So that's why we have a
did
whole
the
new study.
That's why
Okay.
we have a study to talk about today.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Madam Chair?
Go ahead, Andrew. Yeah.
Just going back, George Chapman asked a question that a lot of people ask in the public comment section a minute ago. Said, why here versus something else within a mile of this place or a half mile of this particular location? As far as that, as far as the analysis went, what went into that decision about here's where it should be?
Can I address that as part of my presentation?
Yeah. Cool.
Okay, go ahead. Thank you. Unless there's another question on the timeline.
Great. So thank you for having me here today to present the study. And you see, I've been working on this for quite a while, as I've worked on public market projects all over the country, advising communities when it's feasible to move forward and when it's not feasible, or under what condition it's feasible. Why here? Why do it here? And I think it gets to a question of the variety of reasons. One is that, again, the RDA has identified the market as a key element of the station center development, so we were following the lead of the RDA for that. But it really also gets to the goals. Why are we doing this in the first place? And we identified a number of goals which we think are really important and which the market can achieve. Probably the most important being a catalyst for developing this area, an area in sore need of some catalytic spark to change around a very dire situation. It also very much relates to the outdoor farmers market, that our concept and our belief in this concept and that why it can work is built in part on the 26-year now success of the outdoor farmers market and the more recent success of the winter market component. And we don't see this market kind of in an abstract from that. It's actually very much part of a strategy, which we've been talking about, again, for a long time. And I've been coming, again, to advise Downtown Alliance and the RDA for a number of years. And it's always been about how do we take this really great asset in this farmers market and have it do the next thing for our city. Again, being a catalyst for this district and expanding the impact and benefits of an already successful asset. We also believe that the market can be a hub for the local food movement here. It can support small business entrepreneurship, create jobs, and finally promote community wellness through food access and education. So these goals are critical. It's a defining element of what makes a public market, that we're trying to accomplish something more than just having an economically successful development. So who's been involved in this process? Again, it's the RDA and the Downtown Alliance have been working on this for a number of years. We were mentioned the consultant team led by GSBS and with Market Ventures focusing on the market feasibility and the market design component of this. And then we had an advisory committee that met 4 times throughout the course of the study. They represented a range of different folks involved in the farmers market, in food businesses, in the public sector, developers, and others. So now let's get into a little bit about the economics. Why do we think this makes sense? Who will the customers be? We used a variety of research methodologies to explore this. One was a community internet survey. Nearly 5,000 people from the region took this survey, which is a tremendously strong result. Many of them are current shoppers at the Downtown Farmers Market, but they're not all shoppers. So we got some data on why people don't come to the Downtown Farmers Market, which I think is very interesting. But we didn't rely just on that. We also did a range of interviews and focus groups with potential customers at the market. We looked at demographic analysis, which is very, again, different over the last 10 years, and updated all of that information. And looked at the experience of other public markets around the country to see how this might, what might be the result here. What we found is a very enthusiastic base of current customers who were thrilled with the idea of a place to go on a year-round basis to shop for these kind of products, and very loyal farmers market customers, again, but coming from throughout the region. why don't people come? Well, they don't come because they say, because of parking and because of limited hours. So we know parking is an issue because people shop, generally when they shop for fresh food, they park. Not everyone, but a large percentage drive. So we need to be concerned about parking. And they were discouraged because of the hours, being a Saturday-only opportunity. And the 7-day-a-week public market would address that problem. We know that markets are proven tourist attractions in other communities. At the Grand Rapids Downtown Market, for example, nearly 600,000 people have come this year in the 4th year of the market's operation. So again, that experience has been repeated in a number of other public markets around the country. We did a capture rate analysis looking at a reasonable, very small percentage of food sales from the trade areas we identified, and believe that the market can reasonably capture a little under $20 million in sales for fresh, specialty, and prepared foods at this location. So that's the consumer demand side. The market is made up of vendors, and the success of the market will depend on being able to attract really good vendors. So where will these vendors come from? What we have here, again, because of the success of the Downtown Farmers Market, is a strong base to begin with. 170 different vendors participated in the Downtown Farmers Market this past year, and 70% participated in the winter market. We interviewed at focus groups with a number of these vendors and got very strong response of their interest in participating in a year-round market opportunity. We also would look at other businesses from around the region and potentially businesses from outside the region who could be located here. We have seen, and I've seen over the years I've been involved here, this explosion in the food sector in general in Salt Lake, and the great improvements the city has made in its food sector. And you're seeing now these kitchen incubators being created, and we interviewed the managers of these kitchen incubators, and they felt that, again, the public market opportunity would be a great place for their participants to get involved, kind of startup retail opportunities. Part of our research, we're looking at competition. Where are people shopping for food now? What are some of the gaps? And what are some of the challenges and opportunities around competition? So we know that there's some very strong supermarkets located in the downtown area and in Salt Lake, which make us believe that we have to do something very different for the public market. We have to differentiate the market from those competitors. We also know that this area is designated as a food desert by USDA on the west side of downtown. And the market can play a role. And other public markets do a really good job of serving a wide range of income levels. It has to be a very conscious part of the project if that is part of its goal. There are no other public markets in this region. So in some ways, again, how we build it, it will be unique and is an opportunity to create something very special that can attract customers.
Before you move on, Madam Chair, may I jump in? In that vein of competition and the capture potential, that's capture of existing, not new production. Is that correct, the 19.7?
We estimate people's purchasing of these food products based on national surveys of what people spend on food. So what we know is that it's not a totally set number. You can choose to spend more of your income on food if you find something that is interesting and you like. Right, so it's not a completely fixed number, but it's the best data we have to get a sense of the magnitude of how much money is being spent on these products today based on these national surveys applied to the demographic characteristics of a certain trade area. So it's an estimate, but it's not, I wouldn't say it's set in stone how much money people spend on food.
That helps me understand the way that you arrived at that, and I thought that it was more of a local analysis of current dollars spent in the downtown area, or maybe at the current market in the area grocery stores or something.
Yeah, this is really the best data that I'm aware of. It's based on national surveys of household consumption, and it's applied to the demographic characteristics of a particular area. So it's looking at this area and the trade areas that we defined, it's very kind of outlined in the report, but it's not surveys that was done on a household level of how much people actually are spending, because there's no source of data for that.
Okay.
So at the end of this market research process, again, looking at customers, vendors, competition, we identified a number of key strategies that we think will differentiate this public market from other places and make it a successful, potentially successful development. The first, again, is building off the success of the downtown farmers market. This is not divorced. This is very much part of the evolution of the downtown farmers market. Part of that is looking at this opportunity as a market district. So the indoor market hall is part of a larger set of activities, including the outdoor farmers market, but others as well. We know that we need to offer a really great selection of products. So we need a big enough market with a range of vendors that can offer a great selection of fresh, specialty, prepared foods with a real focus on things that are either grown or produced in Utah. We want to stress innovation and on-site production. This has significant impacts on how we design the market, how much space vendors have. So you're not just going there to buy bread. Bread is being baked in the market, and the vendors that are identified are those kind of food producers who can differentiate themselves from the supermarkets. We need passionate food entrepreneurs. Again, here it's easy to see it because of the downtown farmers market. What it means when you see a very successful vendor in the market, how they bring that passion. We need those. No chain stores. There's no Starbucks. Starbucks got started at Pike Place Market. I would not want Starbucks to be here. We're looking for another kind of business. We need a mixed-use project with multiple income streams, so not just relying on vendor rents to make it work, but other kinds of streams of dollars to make the market itself cash flow. We need to serve regional residents that are interested in unique experience, as well as downtown workers and residents and tourists. Again, this kind of mix is very typical at other public markets. We want to stress the theater of the market being a really fun place to go shop. We need to create a welcoming environment that is accessible to the entire community, including lower income residents. And we need to create unique education and event spaces within the market. So these are our core strategies that came out of the research. Where are we saying to do this? Well, again, we see a district being created. This is a basic outline of where it might be. Really rebranding the Station Center District as a market district. Again, it encapsulates the downtown farmers market. It includes the retailers who are currently along 300 South, such as Caputo's, Aquarius Fish. It includes the 300 South Festival Street, which has been identified in the RDA plan, and we were right outside the door of the public market. It includes the Rio Grande Depot and its continued evolution as a winter market and an event space. It certainly includes the indoor market hall, and we have recommended market sheds, something that came out of a previous study that was very well accepted and of great interest to the farmers to have an enclosed place where they could participate in the farmers market. We see this district and the Festival Street all being managed by one team.
Excuse me, can I interrupt you there for a second? And maybe you're going to fill this in, and I know Director Fritz said we're not looking that much at financials, but that's kind of our job, is to look at some of the financials. On those market sheds, who pays for those? Has that been identified?
To identify that.
Okay, thank you.
And as we did our site analysis of this area, the site offers some really positive qualities, and it also has some challenges around access and circulation. So those are all identified in the report. Again, we've talked about a variety of ways that this thing could get built. We're going to expand on this as we move forward. But this was kind of one potential approach would be to have some underground parking under the site, 2 levels of public market, and then a rooftop deck and for event space and education, and then 3 levels of office. So this fits within the, so one thing we were following, of course, were the Station Center design guidelines, which has the minimum height requirements. And this, to us, felt like, this was identified as the preferred development option in this initial round of the project.
Charlie.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that you mentioned that this is just one of one option that you're looking at. One thing that I would be very interested in seeing, is I think we have a good start on this on the feasibility issue. But one thing that both the council and the administration are in agreement on is the need for affordable housing. One of the things that we as an RDA board have done is to set aside tens of millions of dollars specifically for the construction of affordable housing. And what I would like to see is the inclusion of that in at least one of the options that we're presented with. And that would also include when we were, several of us have had conversations. We were at a homelessness conference in Washington, D.C. last week. Others of us have had conversations about affordable housing when we were in Boston and toward their market. But one of the things that cities who are successful at addressing the affordability issue do is maximize every single opportunity that they have on city-owned property and city-owned development. We're never going to be able to move forward on addressing our affordable housing needs unless we start, maximizing those opportunities. So one of the things, even if it would mean a rezone requirement, would be looking at maximizing the density of that site, even if we need to go higher. I'll just, I'm not going to speak for the council, I'll speak for myself, that if we need to look at increasing the height in order to add more density to this site, I am more than willing to do that. It is a unique opportunity because of its proximity to the intermodal hub. When we look at parking requirements, and I've said this before, normally I believe that we need to have realistic parking requirements. Because of the proximity to the intermodal hub, I would definitely consider a no parking requirement for that affordable housing. I know that is one of the issues that you've been concerned with in the feasibility, from what I've read, just about how housing would take up some of the necessary parking. I don't think we necessarily need to have a housing parking requirement because of the proximity to transit in this area. So when you come back with the next version, I really would like to see kind of the maximization of housing on this site as one of the options, and that includes increased density and increased height.
We'll do it.
Thank you.
If I might jump in looking at this, it's my understanding that probably because we didn't have maybe the best numbers, that housing was kind of set aside as something that we couldn't do because of this, what we thought the income was going to be for square footage. So I'm hoping, given that it is an administrative goal along with the council goal to have housing, that will be something we will come back with an option. Okay, go ahead.
Great, thank you. So we developed a tenant mix plan, again, to meet the goals which I've explained for the market, to have this really great mix, meeting the demand side and the supply side. We came up with a scheme that has 33 businesses on the ground floor, including 2 restaurants in the corners, and a really great range of fresh, specialty, and prepared foods in between, ethnic foods. And we designed the stalls for many of them where they can make the product right there, that they have that theater in the market because you're smelling and seeing the products get created. We'll be looking for vendors that are not just selling retail but have wholesale, catering, other ways that they can be profitable. We developed operating pro forma for all 31 of the vendors that are highlighted here to convince ourselves that they could be profitable businesses and to make sure that they could pay adequate rents to make the project work. So these vendors, as described here, are estimated to have sales of about $16.5 million. That's still below what we think the demand threshold is, so that gives us some room, which makes me feel comfortable. Average profits around $70,000, which again makes me feel that there's an attraction there to find businesses. Now, what we've learned at other public markets is some businesses will do really great and be way beyond that, and some will do worse and won't succeed. That's just the nature of small business. Again, we're creating a model here that we think overall can be successful. So this is the main part of the market. Again, we've designed in a way that's just really great public space, wandering throughout the building on the ground floor. Now, the area which I have boxed out, I think, is another important piece.
One minute.
Before
Board
you
Member
move on.
Mendenhall, did you have a question?
Yes, thank
Thanks.
you. That average profit is per vendor?
Per vendor.
Thank you.
Yes, annual profit. Yeah. So we've created a special part of the market which I think is really appropriate here for Salt Lake, which is what we're calling the 3-day market. That this would be kind of a more flexible indoor space with not as much infrastructure, less cooking, available here, but still electrical and some plumbing. It's a bridge between vendors that come to the winter market, who basically are setting up a table like a farmer's market, and those who are a 7-day-a-week, year-round market vendor. So it's a way to kind of meet vendors where they are. Some are ready to take the step up from being that one-day-a-week vendor, but aren't ready to lose their day job. And by having a 3-day operation, we can create even more opportunities for folks to try out new business ideas. It also lets the market expand on the days when it's busiest, which is Friday through Sunday. So we're meeting consumer demand and meeting vendors' needs all within the public market building. The second floor of the market on the mezzanine has a number of different pieces. An important piece is around event spaces. What we've seen in other public markets is that the event piece can be a significant revenue draw and help the whole market function. So we've identified some kind of sitting areas and flexible space where customers can bring food up from downstairs, event space that has a demonstration kitchen for kind of sit-down large parties. We have some really great education spaces, includes a hands-on cooking school modeled after our work in Grand Rapids with adjustable height cooking surfaces. We have vendor storage here as well. We need to have storage either in the basement or upstairs, and we've identified the basement as a better place for parking. And then there's even some more space there. So we have a kind of small office suite in addition to the market office itself. Then we go up one level and you're on the roof, and we've identified, again, some really interesting outdoor event space looking over the 300 south of Event Street with a variety of kind of agricultural, educational components that we think could be really exciting. It's an amenity for the upper office tenants as well. And then we have one idea of how this outdoor shed could be constructed on the median of 500 West is identified in this plan. On days when the farmer's market shed is not operating for farmers, it becomes customer parking. Basement, we designed, figured out how many spaces we can create. Nearly 380 spaces could be created in 3 levels of underground parking. The office space idea just it works well with the market because the busiest times for the office would be during the week, during the daytime. Likely to be very empty space on the weekends was when the market is busiest. So there's a real nice complementary function of office space and market customer needs. But again, if there's not housing demand, then again, the numbers are different. So these are some images, just to get a sense of what this thing might look like. We're not designing the market, that's up to the architects in a future phase of the work, but we do want to give a sense of what a public market might look like following this design concept. Here you can see how the market relates to the Rio Grande Depot and relates to the 300 South Festival Street. We're seeing a lot of glass in order to maximize that catalytic impact of the market to improve the neighborhood, as well as vendors spilling out. And we've identified vendor stalls around the market that can bring more activity to the building edge and to the street, displacing negative activity with very positive activity. Another view looking now northwest of what the building might look like with the office space on top of 3 levels of office and kind of the upper level deck event and education space. And finally, we have a view of what the interior might look like. Again, individual vendors having their own stall design, but within a framework that works for all the vendors and creates a pattern and a rhythm that is a unified project. So who's going to own it? Who's going to run it? Of course, the RDA is the property owner and the catalyst for this project. The Downtown Alliance has been working with the RDA for many years and studying and of course, succeeding with the outdoor farmers market. We see them as a key partner. They have been the umbrella organization for Urban Food Connections of Utah, which was spun off 5 years ago, I believe, as an independent tax-exempt nonprofit that currently manages the downtown farmers market. And we see that organization as the logical future sponsor and manager of the public market, as well as managing the entire market district, including the festival street. That build the robust management capacity within that organization, expand on its current board of directors and its current structure, but it's the appropriate type of organization to run the market. And we see an opportunity here for a private developer to play an important role in constructing the building and helping to finance it, potentially being an owner. There, again, the variety of models of how this might work in good models around the country. That will be worked out, again, as we move forward. And here you see a staffing plan of the type of resources needed to manage a market of this complexity.
Can I jump in really quick? Laura, have you thought much about the RDA owning this market in perpetuity? Because I never really imagined that the city would be holding this property and owning the market.
Since I know Katie is sitting behind me, she would probably advise us, looking at Katie, that the RDA should not be a long-term holder of property. So ultimately, this is one of those great questions that we need to sort out in this next phase of the analysis, because legally the RDA cannot be a long-term hold.
Thank you.
Again, on the question of how does this work, so this is some of the economic modeling that was done for the public market, not for the overall development, not including the office or the parking, just for the market itself. Again, looking at the income streams from vendor rent and what's reasonable expectation of rents for vendors in markets, you see on the pie chart in the upper right the variety of income streams that we feel would be reasonable to come into the market, including the farmers market income, which is kind of their current actual income for operating the outdoor farmers market. Then we had the restaurants, the special event income, some donations and sponsorships, which happen today for the outdoor farmers market. We see them continuing as being part of the income stream. So it's about a little over, it's about a $2 million income in year one, rising to about $2.7 million by year 5. We've then, of course, modeled the expenses of operating the market. The biggest share of that is staffing costs, as well as then you have maintenance and utilities and waste and marketing and other things. In this model, the market operates profitably by year 2. It's been pointed out that we're showing income from the market sheds, but not showing a source of expense to build that. We can take out easily the market shed income, it's around $80,000. It very slightly affects the income of the market overall, because it affects a number of other elements in the pro forma. So we can change that. Either we'll add a income side for the sheds, or take out to build the sheds, or take out the income that we get from operating the sheds. But it doesn't change the basic fundamental question of, is the market feasible during a reasonable startup period to make this happen? I
have a question for you, and then Cindy, do you have a question? I just need some clarification. Sure. You have the average base rent is $33 a square foot. Is that monthly and annually? Per year. Okay. Because I know right now there are a lot of places in Salt Lake that are $15 to $17 a year.
Sure, absolutely.
So that seems. Why would someone want to spend that kind of money in that neighborhood?
Absolutely. So the size of the stalls are very small. So we're averaging around 600 square feet. So so that's one aspect, is they're small spaces. And secondly, these rents do not include any of the common area. So no circulation spaces, no bathrooms, no loading docks, the things that if you were to have a standalone storefront, you'd need to have in your business. So it's basically a factor of 2. So the fact that we are just about double what retail rents would be in the city means that we're very close.
Because I'm looking out the window over here, and there's a space right over there that's $13 a square foot.
Absolutely.
And people might want to be there more than they want to be there. So I'm just kind of concerned that that's a pretty big leap.
Yeah, no.
Anyway, thank you.
Absolutely, no. And then the other part is, well, why would you want to be part of this facility rather than on the street? And what we've seen is that independent food retailers on the street generally don't do as well, and there's much higher sales opportunity in a public market. And so we model to me the most important number is not rents per square foot, but rent as a percentage of sales. And can we have confidence that these vendors can reach higher sales potential on a per square foot basis than they would if they were in a storefront by themselves? And our experience in other public markets is absolutely they can. Now, is it a guarantee? No. I mean, there are low-performing public markets as well. If we do it right, we have good evidence to show that the sales can be much higher on a per square foot basis than they would do in a standalone retail location somewhere else in a downtown area.
Let me call on City Gus Jensen, our executive director.
Just a couple of clarifying points. I think it's safe to say, and I just want to be clear about it for the group, that the public market income and public market expenses do not include any funds at all for construction of a market, without regard to whether it's attached.
There's no debt service. Absolutely. There's no debt service.
No construction costs included. Right. And then also, I think there have been several amenities that have been mentioned that might not be included in the expenses. So when we come back and do the more detailed financial analysis, maybe we can go through and be sure that we're clear about each thing and whether it is in here or whether it's hoped that someone else will fund it.
Just back to the price per square foot, one of the primary goals under the key strategies slide was to keep rents affordable. And so you are suggesting that we'll keep them affordable based on our anticipated revenue per vendor? Okay.
Well, 2 things. So part of that is the sales potential. The second is that these are averages, and there's great variation in the model. And so the rents that we believe is reasonable for a produce vendor to pay, or a meat vendor, which are critical products for the experience for the customer in the market, and also have lower profitability. So the rents, there's not a common rent for everyone, a common square foot rent. The model has much lower rents for those core staple ingredients and much higher rents per square foot for those selling high profit items such as prepared foods or coffee. And that's actually currently the case of how the downtown farmers market operates. The vendors who sell prepared foods pay a higher rate than those who are selling farmers.
So what you're saying is that this $33 per square foot is actually the average, as it says here.
Mm-hmm.
So people are going to be paying higher than $33 per square foot.
Some.
What's the cap there? What's the ceiling on that? Do you have any idea what we anticipate?
I mean, it's all in the report. I have to look it up.
I'm just curious.
Yeah.
You know,
I think the highest is 50. I think. Which again, coffee maybe higher.
It shows here $62 a square foot, with the CAM and the percentage of rent at $62 a square foot.
So this is two different conversations. So there is other costs associated with being in the market as we've modeled it, including common area cost and percentage of sales, all modeled in a way that every business can be profitable. So that is absolutely correct. And it varies significantly based on what the business is selling, the size of the number of square feet that they're taking, and it depends on their sales because the percentage rent kicks in when their sales, it varies based on the model.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I wish that we could just skip this slide altogether because it's not accurate. I mean, it doesn't show the debt service. So when you're looking at a net operating income, that's not true because you have debt after the first 5 years. You have debt the first day you're going into it. So to me, this is just very leading in the wrong direction. We don't have the full analysis yet, too.
So we'll look for a more full analysis. Go ahead.
Absolutely.
Board members, are you okay if we move on from that? Okay, thank you.
This is a little bit repetitious of what you've seen already in terms of the timeline. Again, I'd go back a little further because the founding of the Downtown Farmers Market in 1992, again, a number of studies that have happened. Again, we're in the midst of this 2017 study. Some future steps, again, we have currently identified around, identifying a developer's potential role in the market, disposing of the land under the scenario that the RDA is not the long-term landowner, and some agreements between the different partners in the project of how the market will always be a part of the facility. How long would it take to build it? Probably a 24 to 30 month period once the financing is in place. So my last slide is kind of the overall assessment. Again, I am not here as a booster of public markets. I'm here as an analyst of public markets. They are challenging environments. I don't want to pretend that this is something you snap on fingers and it happens automatically. What we know is that when they work, they can be incredibly impactful. But one has to be very thoughtful and have all the pieces in place before that happens. But we also know, again, a number of other things, that the downtown farmers market has proven some things, that the market can succeed in downtown Salt Lake, that we have a strong customer and a strong vendor base, that we believe we can capture a reasonable share of consumer demand to support a public market of good size, that we have a lot of enthusiasm and interest from potential vendors. We have some challenges on the site from the access and circulation standpoint, but also some real positives in terms of visibility. And people certainly knowing the Rio Grande Depot is an important piece of that as well, and very good transit access, that's already been mentioned. That we can focus on food production and a variety of ways that small businesses can succeed here and have a facility that meets those needs. That the market district concept, we believe, will attract both local, regional, and tourists to the market, as has happened in other places, with, again, a market that has a bunch of components, including events, educational programming, good marketing, and all the other elements that we know lead to success. And finally, we need to have a skilled design, development, and management team with the right financial resources, and that's, again, the piece that will be forthcoming to make sure before any decisions are made that you have those resources to be successful.
Thank you very much. Board members, do you have general questions before we maybe go into the questions that we have that our staff has raised? Andrew?
Yeah, just going back to the accessibility for all income levels, I think it was said different ways a couple different times in there.
Yeah.
How does this do that? What's the model do to promote that, I guess?
Right. Well, it's having products that are of interest to all folks of every ethnic group and income level. It's ensuring that all vendors take food stamps. Not every market does that, but that could be a requirement of the lease that everyone has to take food stamps. Implementing programs like the Double Bucks program, which is currently used at the downtown farmers market, which is a method to double the value of food stamps being sold at a market. That can be a very large component. It's a substantial part of the farmers market today. 20,000, what's Nelson go? What was your redemption this year around? Do you remember? Yeah, do you recall? $25,000. So that's important, and that's getting a lot of fresh food in the hands of low-income people. The Rochester Public Market in New York State did $1.2 million of food stamp dollars this year. So a very conscious effort to attract a wide range of consumers to the market. I think the outdoor farmers market, the market sheds, is part of that because you can have lower rent rates and have cheaper foods to make that work. So that's part of it. It's being marketing in multiple languages. It's being accessible. It's being welcoming to the whole community. So I think there's a number of things, encouraging minority ownership of businesses in there too. So there are a number of strategies which are being used by other public markets which have proven to be very successful. Again, not to say it's easy, again, that we're trying to run a really strong operation that doesn't require any operating subsidy. Not even talking about the development subsidy that might be required to make it work. We don't want any operating subsidy. So, rents have to be at a certain level to make the whole program work and to do that. So I don't, again, claim it's easy to do it. There are good models of other public markets that have successfully served lower income communities. If that's, again, an intent of the project, then we need to build that into the model and make sure that it can work.
Madam Chair, one follow-up question just came to my mind. So are you looking at extending current policies or what works at the seasonal market, right, across the board to the year-round market as well, so it would be seamless? Or would there be clear differences in your experience going to a vendor here versus at the outdoor farmers market at the park? Is that sort of does the model say it's a one-stop shop, same policy across the board kind of thing? Or?
Yeah, generally not. I mean, so there are some differences. Outdoor farmers markets generally work hard to be only grow it yourself kind of place. The goal typically in indoor markets is to maximize the amount of local foods, knowing your 7-day-a-week operation, knowing that you're going year-round. And of course, there's some seasonal variation in what's available at different times of the year, and you have to balance the goal of having predominance and a focus on Utah-grown food and the reality of having something to sell. And what we've seen over time is that when the marketing facility is available, the farmers will adapt and grow more. And it's a bit of a chicken and the egg. There's a great deal of capability to extend growing seasons, but there has to be a place to sell those products. We had some great conversations with some of the farmers who currently sell at the outdoor farmers market who want to participate as full-time vendors inside the market, and it will justify their investment in more greenhouses and other ways to extend their season with more cold storage. But it'll take some time to get there. So therefore, the rules have to be a little bit different on the indoor market than the outdoor market to allow that to happen. Because if you said it has to be only local foods all the time in the indoor market, there would be some periods when it might be kind of thin on the inside. So we have to be a little bit different.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions, board members? Yes.
Thank you. This was a really great report, and I agree with my peers that we want to see some other components brought into it. But I'm really pleased with the beginning conversation that we get to have here, and I want to drill down a little bit further, I think, into what Andrew was doing and talking about, and go back to the recognition of the food desert on the west side of our downtown, and really the recognition that the food desert extends farther west than downtown in much of our community. Really, half of our city is west of this park and or this area, and could recognize and probably benefit from what we're talking about creating here. And then you talked about the sort of the something for everyone approach that our current summer downtown outdoor farmers market provides. It really does have an assortment of interests and food types. But I'm wondering when, in your experience, which is clearly on a national level, that's what I'm looking for. At what point in recognizing food deserts, in recognizing minority demographics, in recognizing income disparity in the area, do you tip toward a more culturally focused market? And I think that the west side of our city has a lot of those components and might be very interested in a more culturally centric type of a marketplace.
Great. Yeah. I'll go back to the mix of vendors in the market because it addresses it a little bit, where we have this ambiguous ethnic vendor there, and I think that's a nod to the notion that the market should be the place where the ethnicities of this region are represented, and that's not to say that a flower business or a produce business can also be ethnic, and certainly that is a positive element, I think, of the market experience. But so this is a bit of a nod to say that we want ethnicity in the market. We want to reflect the range of ethnicities that's represented in the community and the great foods that those ethnicities represent. So I'm totally in agreement with you that we need to figure that out. I think there could be other opportunities to think about it and some other different strategies without altering the important elements of the downtown farmers market and the work it's done to be a place to get local foods. Perhaps other days of the week that on a Sunday there is a little bit more flexibility in what's offered, and one allows there to be wholesale stuff that comes from the wholesale house. And I think there often is a challenge between having accessible, lower priced foods and the goal of having all local or more locally grown products, because typically it's hard to meet the cheap prices of product that comes from around the world. And some markets are very flexible in terms of allowing wholesale, again, stuff that comes from a wholesale house to come in.
There's a compromise.
Yeah, and so they have different approach to do that. So we have to be very careful that we don't want to, again, take away what's been built from the downtown farmers markets and its success and why customers drive 30 minutes, many of them, to go shop there and what they're looking for, and this other goal of serving lower income consumers. The double bucks is one approach to it. There could be others. Having the infrastructure there, having this management team, having all these pieces, I think allows you over time to keep doing more and doing better around some of those roles. Again, there's been such, I think, I've been involved in a lot of projects for a lot of years, and I think one reason why I think this project offers such a great opportunity is because it builds on the farmers market. It's not just plopping a public market down in some other location that might have good site characteristics, but it doesn't benefit from that 26-year history. So we want to respect that history and the success of that and build from it, but also look at new opportunities and new ways of doing things. And when you have a 7-day-a-week facility, you have potentially these market sheds and other things. You can bring in other components to solve and probably let's address those kind of concerns.
So it sounds like, tell me if I'm hearing you correctly, that we may be touching on a viable conversation in our city for a market, but this particular study and this particular location is really foundational, or is built upon a foundation of the existing downtown farmers market. And whether or not a more ethnically focused, culturally diverse market may be viable, this isn't the study that's going to talk about that, but that there are cases where that can work in a city.
I guess I wouldn't frame it that way. I mean, I guess it depends what the vision is in your head of a more culturally diverse, sustainable model is.
There isn't one here.
Yeah.
But
We will serve lots of English scones.
I'm sorry?
That's
We're going
one
with
culture.
the ethnicity. We will serve English scones, because or Scandinavian foods. But if we're trying to reach out a little more than that, but I want to move us along because we are 30 minutes over. But I still want to allow questions. I, as the chair, I'm supposed to go last, but I'm going to violate that and ask you a question. You have expertise in this area. You've done a lot of studies and helped with public markets. Have you seen very many cities where the city didn't have to invest capital from public funds? Be it in a building, land?
In the Grand Rapids downtown market, which was approximately a $30 million project, the city donated the land, so through the RDA, actually, and they continue the ownership there. They don't have the issue, I guess, of owning land. So they have $1 a year lease for 99 years. The city redirected some funds from federal EPA and other, but fairly small dollars. They used brownfield redevelopment dollars to fund infrastructure improvements around the market, but not for the market itself. The funding came from the state of Michigan through its economic development agency, primarily, and through private philanthropic donation.
So it sounds like the answer is yes, public funds are generally needed for public markets.
Right. I was.
It's in land
Yeah,
or
yeah.
it's something
No,
else.
I mean,
There's got to be investment.
There has to be an
from the
investment. So
public.
our expectation here and what we're modeling is how much of the private dollars could be leveraged by adding valuable office or housing and underground parking to the mix that might offset some, but unlikely to be all of the cost. So that was my assumption going into it. It altered around during the process as there was some error in the calculation. We're back to that notion of what's a reasonable amount of, or not reasonable, what is the gap that would need to be funded. We don't know the answer. In other cities, I'm working right now in a project in New York where a private developer is paying the entire cost of rebuilding a market because his ability to build 14 stories of housing above it. Now, this is not the Lower East Side of New York City, so we don't have the same economics, of course. So there are models where there is no public investment in the facility, and there is a range of privately developed markets currently that's happening around the country, which are really focused on being upscale food courts. That was not what we're calling food halls. That was not our goal here, and we haven't designed the facility to do that, where you can charge sometimes rather extraordinarily high rents. Again, these rents are higher than you might see on the street, but they're very much lower than food hall rents. So we're trying to find the right balance to meet the project goals, to again to build on the concepts. So my understanding of the question to me is specifically city dollars going to a market. The Grand Rapids project did not have city dollars devoted beyond the value of the land. There was other public funding that went into it.
Mine's a follow-up
go
in
ahead,
regards
James.
to that. And mine is more in the terms of consistency. Are there any public markets that are sustaining themselves without the added housing component or office component that are just sustaining themselves completely off of the lease space on the public market?
Yeah, so the Grand Rapids project, I spoke to the director this morning. They had a
I didn't hear that.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm having a really hard time. You're speaking way too fast.
I apologize. I blame my mother for my fast speech, but that's just not her fault. The Grand Rapids downtown market opened up almost 4 years ago. I spoke to the director this morning just to clarify, to make sure I had current numbers. The net profit of that market this past year was $200,000. So again, on an operating basis, currently not paying any debt service, but the market is profitable operation. Similarly, the Milwaukee public market is operating on a positive cash flow basis.
But if you include the debt service on both those projects, does it sustain itself?
No, and that wasn't designed that way.
That wasn't my question. I wasn't looking for it. I was just wondering, is there any market that is sustaining itself currently with the debt service?
Is there any market? A totally privately developed market with no public subsidy that meets all the criteria that we've established here? I'd have to think about it. I don't think so.
But visually, off the top of your head, obviously there isn't one.
No, that's why, again, I assumed going into this project that there would be some financing gap that would require a public or philanthropic investment, because that has been the model in other places, and that's something that, again, we've been talking about that in the steering committee and meet with the Downtown Alliance for a number of years. I didn't go into it expecting it to be fully paid for by a developer. If developers could do this, there'd be many more of these, and that's why we have these conversations. And it's the benefits of the market around jobs, catalytic improvements, small business development. That's what you're getting, whomever is making that investment. Again, these are generally not private investments. Okay, I had thought of one. In Suburban Square outside of Philadelphia, there is a public market and really meets all the fresh food criteria and everything else. It's called it'll come to me. But it's in the Suburban Square development, totally private, no public money, sustainable. It's been around for quite a long time now.
You said that's in the Urban Square development?
Suburban Square, it's called, which is outside of Philadelphia.
Okay, thank you.
Ardmore Farmers Market, it's called.
Board members, I think that I probably speak for all of us. We think a public market is a really cool idea, but it is also important to us that it be financially sustainable and work. I think having a beach house at Malibu is a really great idea too. I can't afford it, so I can't have it. So I think that's why it's important we get these questions answered, and it's our responsibility to figure that out. And so with that, I would like to work through the policy questions and allow us a few minutes to do that have been identified in the staff report. We've discussed a little bit the concern about insufficient cash flow, but I have a question prior to that, what, in your analysis, what is the city's role here? Is it only providing the land, or is it providing more than that?
That needs to be answered.
That hasn't been answered.
That has not been answered yet.
Okay. Board members?
Well, I will state that we're not whatever we come up with, right, the goal will be that there is no ongoing subsidy from the city. So we need to come up with a feasible model that has the proper income development capital to make it work. So there will not be any need for ongoing public subsidy, which is the model, again, I've created in other projects around the country.
So is there an expectation that the building will pay for itself that we put in?
The model that we hope to create is one that allows there to require some level of investment, which we can't yet identify, but after that, that would be it.
But, Madam Chair,
Yes.
we're not talking about a repayment, so it would be a grant, essentially.
I don't know what that might look like. I mean, could there be a loan? I don't. Again, we don't want to take anything off the table at this point, so I don't know. Unless you say, you know, there's absolutely no city money available. Period. Let's not talk about it any longer. Then we'll figure it out without that. Again, that was the experience in other public markets where there was land donation and that was it. Now, we don't know yet, and then you'll have to decide whether, you know, there are funds and this is a worthwhile project to accomplish the goals for Station Center. But that's and I would just suggest we postpone that conversation until we have something that, you know, that's more concrete to talk about.
Those numbers. Board members, other questions? I want to make sure I'm not the only one who's asked.
I want to
Yes, go
continue
ahead.
just for a moment,
Yes,
because
please.
I think that I know for myself, I would like to have this conversation continue. I do want to look at the financials. I want to look at what housing would look like, and I want to talk about what, based on the entirety of Station Center and the desires of our future hopeful tenants that will fill and transform this area, I want to talk more about how the public market fulfills what they want and who we're trying to bring in and the kind of tenants that we hope to have living in this area. You know, I want to look at it in that holistic sense. Today's not the day to do that. But I also don't want it to sink today because of, you know, some things that aren't in this report today. So I don't want to shut this down right now. I want this to continue, but I think it's important to recognize that in my opinion, the experience of this body in the different hats that we wear is nervous to proceed down a path where the definition of our investment into the future is unclear, because sometimes we feel like we get backed into a corner, and now we're 3 years into this conversation, and now these, you know, potential donors are waiting for us to say yes, and we don't want to say yes at that point. We aren't ready yet. So I ask you to be mindful and work quickly to resolve these questions that we have, so that we don't feel backed into a corner and the conversation dies under its own weight at that point. So I think that's the reality of the culture here.
Additional questions, board members? Do you have one?
You know, to pick up where Erin was, where she left off, I agree. I think we need to get some clarity on this study. I think we're, as a board that paid for this, I think we are obviously owed a some complete financials on this, and so I definitely look forward to seeing a pro forma that works, because, you know, I started my business at the farmers market, and we have been relatively successful, and we have a lot of experience with other vendors that have helped see the market grow and develop, and I think that this has an enormous potential to help transform the Rio Grande neighborhood, has potential to become a regional tourist draw, and I think that, you know, our downtown economic development goals could really benefit from a public market. But to Erin's point, we're not willing to continue to have a conversation that we don't understand our full investment, and so we want to make sure that we get there. But as I mentioned in our meeting earlier today, I would like to, you know, as the RDA board, at some point, schedule some time to have a conversation about what we can do in the Depot District in Station Center that will be a productive activity that aligns with our goals for alleviating the problems that this neighborhood faces. And so I do in some ways see the public market as an opportunity for us to address that. But I think as we move along and hopefully get something turned around relatively quickly from the consultants and the RDA on a pro forma that fits more squarely within the reality of the situation, that maybe we can have that conversation together. But I don't want this to fall flat today, and I don't want anybody to walk away feeling like the board has completely deflated this idea altogether.
Charlie?
And I'm going to build on what both Derek and Aaron mentioned. And I'm going to ask for some help from our community partners on this. I know that there have been some discussions and some ideas from individuals who are in the within the community who feel like the RDA board is that we're dragging our feet on this, that we're not interested in moving forward quickly. And I would appreciate the help from our community partners to dispel that. We are, I have not heard anything to indicate that we are not interested in this program. That it is not something that we just want to let stagnate. But there are still some questions that we need to have answered. I want to recognize Jennifer and Bruno from council staff and the work that she's done over the weekend, working with RDA, working with Laura. I think the relationship is collaborative, and I appreciate the fact that she was able to find this issue and begin working directly with RDA staff on this, and I hope that continues. I think that we are moving. We're not moving quickly. We would move quicker if when we have the questions and the information that we're looking for. Again, I mentioned housing as something that is very important to me, and I think to my other, I can speak for my other board members, because it is one of the RDA's board's priorities, one of the administration's priorities, one of the council's priorities. And I do think that there is a great opportunity here because of the proximity to the transit hub, because of the fact that that this area has been identified as a food desert. We can't have, realistically, we can't have successful housing without transportation. We can't have successful housing without services and amenities. And I think that the market serves the food and amenity component of necessary housing. So, I look forward to continue to working with the RDA, working with our consultant, working with our community partners, and I would really appreciate the help from our community partners again to let individuals in the community who are really excited about this project understand that it is moving forward, that we are moving forward, that as soon as we have some of the critical questions answered, we can ensure that we're moving forward successfully instead of just moving forward. So, thank you.
Affordably moving forward. Andrew?
I love the idea of it, frankly. I think if we can find the right model, it's a wonderful opportunity on a number of levels. So I'm looking forward to the further discussions. This shouldn't be the end of this at all.
Anyone else? I would then ask that I'll take a look at our excellent staff report that raises a number of questions. We agree with those questions, even if we haven't spent the time expressing them out loud today. If you would please be sure to address that. I think you heard loud and clear we want to see a model with housing included as part of it. And we look forward to having you also square those numbers so that we're not servicing $4 million a year of debt with an unknown way to do it. That would be very helpful, and we look forward to having you join us again when we've got that information. Any other questions then? Okay, then we will move to the next item on our agenda, which is item number 3. Thank you again for being here. The proposed State Street Community Reinvestment Area boundary modifications. Cara, would you like to join us? You've had a busy weekend, I know. And thanks for your help on the previous issue. Okay. And I neglected to welcome Mayor Jackie Biskupski, who is our executive director. We're glad to have you here. Thank you. All right. Rock and roll.
Okay. Thank you, Chairwoman Adams. In our excitement this morning, I did not get the presentation that I'm about to give to the council staff, so we are loading that right
That's
now.
okay.
But I can just start by explaining why I'm here and giving a little background. And we're up. This item is about potentially
Jill, thank you for joining us. We also have Jill Wilkerson-Smith with us.
Potentially adjusting the boundaries for the State Street CRA. Back in April of 2016, the RDA board approved boundaries for this project area that we proposed. And then in February 2017, RDA staff came back to the board with a proposal to add 2 new blocks to the project area, blocks 39 and 51. And at that time, the board requested that the RDA provide additional information about possibly expanding the western edge of the project area to incorporate the proposed Homeless Resource Center at 275 West High Avenue, which would make it so we could provide the RDA tools to the neighborhood and community around the Homeless Resource Center. So we looked at 3 potential scenarios that I wanted to go through today. And for each of those, we have the boundary map, and then some data that we used in our original analysis of proposed project areas, which is we looked at the estimated tax increment that we would get from these areas, the land use information, the building value versus land value analysis, which helped us evaluate the redevelopment potential, and whether the area complied with the county CDA criteria. So I'll go through each of these. In this map, you can see those 2 yellow circles at the top are blocks 39 and 51. And then over to the west, we have the area, so for option 1, the area immediately surrounding the Homeless Resource Center. And the boundaries of that area are 300 West, High Avenue, Harris Avenue, and 200 West. Sorry, I need to pull up some notes here.
Can you remind me what the notch is that kind of mirrors it on the other side from High Avenue on the right side of the screen? Is this, it's a school?
It's Whittier and Salt
okay.
Lake Community College.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so in our review of this area, we found that the additional TI by adding this small area would be about $600,000 per year, or no, over 25 years. The total acreage is about 27 acres. It complies with the majority of the CDA requirements for the county, and the zoning is primarily general commercial. So what we found when we went through this is these, each of these options is not very different. Except in terms of the size of the area and therefore the amount of tax increment that we will realize over 25 years. So if we look at the zoning here, we have primarily general commercial, like I just mentioned, in that option 1 area. And then this is analysis of the redevelopment potential that we do by looking at the value of the building versus the value of the land. So we know, I'll go to one extreme, a piece of land that has a Lowe's on it, has a very high value building on it. And so the redevelopment potential there is fairly low, and that would show up as green on this map. So conversely, if the building value is small compared to the land value, that indicates to us that there's high redevelopment potential. So when we looked at this area, we had about 37% in the red, 18% yellow, and 45% green.
And I just have to bring up that I know you're using county assessor information, I'm assuming, and it's really difficult to say with a resource center coming in how land value, property value will be affected. Like, it will be affected.
Right.
And somehow, right. And
Yeah.
I don't expect you to predict that, but I think it's such a strange thing that I don't feel like I could put a lot of confidence in what the assessor tells us today.
Right.
I want to.
Right. And that is what we found. Looking at this data was helpful because it continued the process that we went through to look at all of our potential project areas. But to differentiate between these three options, it really doesn't tell us very much because of what you said and because really these three areas aren't that different in terms of redevelopment potential and zoning and how it fits into the county's CDA requirements.
So you're giving us the best you've got.
It's the best we have, but I think what we're hoping is that you guys will be able to look at the maps of these three proposed boundaries and see what you think of them and pass a resolution that adopts one of the revised boundaries.
Madam Chair? Yes. What about the taxing entities? What did they have to say about the three options when you approached them with it on it?
No.
No. Is there an appetite for one other than the other that you know of, or?
Between the taxing entities, or no, I don't know. We haven't met with them.
And we've asked you in the past about a tipping point of size. I know that we're getting big here.
Right.
And what is too big?
Right. I don't think that's a number that anyone has given us. It might be the number we figure out when we've gotten too big. So.
Besides the Northwest Quadrant, right?
Ooh.
So, okay, should I move on to the next slide?
Yeah.
Oh, do you have a question? Okay. Let's go. So that was redevelopment potential. Okay, now this is the boundaries for option 2. This goes primarily from 200 West to I-15, except for the one block between 1400 South and High Avenue that goes as far east as West Temple, then 1300 South to 1700 South. So the estimated 25-year tax increment here was around $5 million. The acreage now goes up to 107 acres. Again, complies with most of the county's CDA requirements, and it's primarily general commercial.
Sorry, I just was coming in. You said it goes up to $5 million per year?
No, I'm sorry if I said per year. I keep saying that, but it's over 25
That's
years.
right. I just was like, okay, that might make this an easy choice.
So looking at redevelopment potential, we had 49% with high redevelopment potential, 7% yellow, and 44% with what we considered low redevelopment potential. And then the third option goes primarily from 200 West to I-15 between 1300 South and 1700 South, except for the one block between 14 South and Harris that goes east to West Temple, like last time. And then this time it goes north of 1300 South from 300 West to I-15 as far north as approximately Aspen Avenue, which is the hook that already exists in the proposed project area. So for this one, our 25-year tax increment is estimated around $6.5 million. The parcel acreage is 135 acres. Again, complies with most of the county CDA policy requirements and is primarily general commercial. Here are the numbers to compare the redevelopment potential. We've got 49% with a lot of redevelopment potential, 9% sort of neutral, and 42% with low redevelopment potential. And that's all we have in terms of the data we're presenting. But I imagine we probably want to go back to the maps and for your discussion if you have any questions about that.
Board members, questions?
I have.
Somehow I thought you might.
No, I'll try to keep it concise.
It's your district.
Well, I think it's really interesting. I really appreciate that you try to give us some meat to the map options here. And I think it's There's a lot we could talk about what are we really, what's our goal of including these extra areas. I know the HRC inclusion is my primary goal in the why we're talking about these options, but I think it's also about support, or within that goal is really about supporting the area around the HRCs, and capturing the potential of 300 West, our second highest revenue generating area in the city for taxes, and like pretty much ignored all the time.
Thank you, Costco.
And we know from the HRC site selection process that there's a lot of property available in this area. And there's a lot of strong anchor tenants from the Home Depot up to Target in this Third West corridor, and many in between, many more to be also. And I think we're going to see residential density growing in this area. So I think it's, I'm leaning towards options 2 and 3, and I want to have that kind of conversation. But as great as this information is, I think there's a lot of context about why we're talking about this map expansion in the first place, that, the RDA benefits areas when we create project areas, and that's the point here for me.
Board members, does anyone else want to weigh in on one of the options? And if you do, Andrew? Yeah.
I'm with Aaron, Madam Chair. I prefer options 2 or 3. I guess that's C or D. To me, you look at that area from the freeway to 300 West. That's the area that needs the most work, really. I mean, you've had all that heavy commercial there. For me, I'm leaning towards option 3 because it's a carryover from that freeway, that divider right there, to the rest of the area. So that's the way I'm looking, is 3.
Madam Chair? Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I am supportive of option 3 just because it's a larger area, and I think that the potential for development is ripe in that area, and I think that the more that we can include of that, the better off we will be, in terms of the success of this RDA area. So I would say option 3, but I'm okay with option 2 as well.
Derek?
I'll let Board Member Johnston go ahead first.
Thank you.
I understand the arguments. I'm concerned we have 3 different areas, or at least 2 different areas now in one area. And I understand the point about dealing with Third West, which needs to be dealt with and needs some reinvestment in it. I mean, you shouldn't pull off the udder of your cow, but State Street, I think, was the point, the first part. And how do we have the staff or the ability, the bandwidth in the RDA department, I guess, number 1, to handle an area of this size in addition to everything else going on? That's my concern, I guess, about expanding this as large as it is. It's not the Northwest Quadrant, but that's a whole different deal. I mean, this is very distinct business districts that all need a lot of attention, and how in the world do we deal with that? Can you give me some help here about understanding how do you manage a project area, say number 3? How do you manage that project area with that much acreage and that many businesses and that many needs on 2 distinct areas effectively with everything else going on?
I think in terms of staff resources, well, in terms of using tax increment, the same is probably true. And this is what we talked about with the State Street / ballpark area, is that we really need to identify our areas of concentration in these project areas, and focus on the areas that are identified as priorities. So having the larger area doesn't necessarily mean we'll be spreading out the tax increment evenly per acre, but it does give us an opportunity to have more areas that we want to focus on because we know there's a need there. I don't know if that answers your question as well as you'd like, but I think that is our best approach with a large project area like this.
Are you saying that then you sort of go area by area within the project area?
Yeah,
as
Yeah.
determine where you need to go first, right?
I think so. We did that a little bit back when it was State Street Ballpark and conducted community meetings and, gathered feedback from the community. Where are your areas that you're most concerned about? Where can we help the most? And where are our resources best spent? So I think that process would hold with this larger area also.
I actually don't have a strong feeling either way on this. I can see some benefits of going with option 3, for instance, looking at the map and where the boundary already has that hook on the western edge, right up against the freeway. It would make sense for me to include the area around Target and the Walmart and the Lowe's and everything. That feels natural to me. Yet at the same time, I think it's worth pointing out that redevelopment is already starting to happen in this part of town. There's a big housing project going in on Paxton Avenue that was just permitted not too long ago. And so I guess I have a hard time truly advocating for this. And then I also think about it this way. If we have 135 acres if we have a budget of 135 acres to create an RDA area, is there an opportunity for us to do small neighborhood project areas elsewhere with that budget? And so I just, maybe as a board, it might be good for us to think about how we are expending our relationships with the county and other taxing partners, and where we might want to put our tax increment resources. And so I guess I can see a benefit here. I also think that if somebody has a strong feeling against it, I would be willing to entertain that. My primary goal, to Aaron's point, was to draw in the homeless resource centers, and I think all 3 options have done that sufficiently for me. And I don't see that expanding it too far would have much an impact on the resource centers either. So I'm indifferent, to be honest.
Further discussion about any of the proposed areas? Andrew?
I don't want to get, the idea of having a focus area comes after, right? That process about where you're going to focus stuff. But I think in this instance, if we're going to go this large, we have to understand that, because we're going in already knowing this. We know we have a couple areas. State Street was one, or parts of that, right? Specific pieces of state, and then the homeless resource center. And as we add all the rest of this, it expands sort of the push to draw dollars there, right? And if redevelopment's already happening coming south from Central 9th, and on 9th West as an economic corridor, does it need the reinvestment in the entire thing? And that's my concern with this huge addition to an already massive area, about diluting the effectiveness of it for a large area that, sure, all of it maybe needs it, but I'm not sure we're able to deliver. Sort of the expectation would be we deliver for a lot of places here, and I don't know that we could do that as effectively as we'd like. As much as I'd hope we could do this whole thing, I'm concerned about
Eric?
that piece. So,
Does staff have a preferred selection here?
What I did fail to mention is that we did bring this to RAC and get a recommendation, and I'm so sorry that I didn't bring that up when I introduced this. So let me back up a little and tell you what the RAC recommendation was. I showed them the 3 options on July 10th, and their recommendation was option 3, and that was based on a couple of things. One is that option 1, they didn't feel it included enough area around the proposed homeless resource center to really support the neighborhood. Option 2, they felt left several parcels stranded under the hook, I believe. Yeah. So on the north side of the extension below the hook. And so for those reasons, primarily, they chose option 3. And then just sort of back of the envelope calculation that was done in the RAC meeting to see, if we look at the tax increment per acre, even though I just said we wouldn't be spreading it out evenly, we do have the highest tax increment per acre for option 3. It was about $48,000 per acre, and option 2 was about $46,000 per acre, and option 1 was about $22,000 per acre. So that was just sort of a, supporting piece of evidence to them to move forward with, to recommend moving forward with option 3.
Further questions? Then I would look for a motion.
I'll move
Go ahead.
that the board, I'm sorry, I'm not looking at the motion sheet.
There isn't
Just
one. You
that
could
we'll
just
approve option
make it-
3.
Yeah.
Yes. I
Second.
move that we approve option 3.
Second.
Thanks, James.
Okay, Katie, is that sufficient? We don't have to say for what it is? Okay, great. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It is unanimous. Thank you so much, and thank you very much for that report.
Kara,
We will-
Madam Chair, just to
Yes.
follow up, so now that we've done this, now you go to the taxing entity partners
Yes.
in August, or do you have a bit of a timeline for us?
I would like to have Susan follow up with you on what comes next, because I was covering this item for her, and I think she's
Okay.
just more familiar with what the plan is for the next steps.
Okay.
I'm sorry about that.
That's okay. An email would be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's okay, and we know you're really busy helping get answers for the public market, so thank you for all your help on that.
Thank you.
We now move to item 4, the Granary District Adaptive Reuse Program. Invite Tammy Hunsaker from the RDA staff to join us at the table. Thank you. As she's setting up, I'll remind board members that we are asked to, they're hoping that we're going to approve the adaptive reuse program policy or approve it with modifications or defer action to another meeting. So those are our 3 options. And you have a handout in your folder about this. Looks like this. Whenever you're ready, Tammy.
Sorry,
No
I
rush. No,
apologize.
we've got it in front of us, so it's okay.
Were technical difficulties. Full screen. All right, thank you. As mentioned, I have an update on you for the Granary District Adaptive Reuse Program. And this program was initially established in 2014 as a pilot program with some funding set aside. And since then, we've carried out 2 very successful projects.
And I'm going to start right off the bat by interrupting you, reminding board members that as I was reading through our minutes from a few months ago, one of the things we said is find us some ways to do adaptive reuse, and here we have it. So thank you.
I apologize. More technical difficulties. Okay, I think we're set. So now that the board appropriated additional funding for this program during the current fiscal year, I think there's just under $300,000 appropriated for the program. We want to come back and establish more permanent policy guidelines that better reflect the recent changes that were made to the RDA loan program. So they do mirror that program somewhat, and they comply better with separation of powers that occurred over the previous year. So in the policy, a mission statement is established, and this is similar to what we've been doing, provide forgivable loans to incentivize the adaptive reuse of underutilized buildings in the Granary District, leverage private investment, and of course, facilitate the implementation of transformative projects that get people living, working, and playing in the Granary District. So just to recap, the 2 successful projects that have been carried out over the past couple of years, the first one was Atmosphere Studios, located at 326 West, 700 South. This project was completed in 2015. The program committed $75,000, and in return, we stimulated $1.8 million of private investment. So that's a considerable amount, and this did not include the acquisition cost. So that's actual investment into the building. The second project that was completed was Fisher Brewing Company. This was completed earlier this year in April at 320 West, 800 South. Again, we contributed $75,000 to the project for an $875,000 total investment, not including acquisition. So this is a great way to get private investment focused into the Granary District. So under the proposed policy guidelines, The requirements for the project are that they must be obviously located in the granary district, align with our overall policy and objectives for the area, demonstrate that the funding is necessary and reasonable. We don't want to unduly enrich a developer on a project that would take place otherwise, and that the project converts a vacant, underutilized, or economically challenged building into one of the following uses: dwelling units, joint live-work units, neighborhood-oriented retailer services, or office or commercial space.
Can you tell me more about what neighborhood-oriented retailer services is? Does the bar qualify for that, for instance?
Or, yeah, or it could even be maybe a health clinic or some other neighborhood serving business. But I do want to mention that we did present this policy to RAC on July 10th, and they actually recommended the policy as presented, but they did have a recommended change for this requirement, and they really wanted any use allowed under the zoning to be eligible for the program rather than limiting it to these 4 areas. So that's one of their recommended changes. The maximum funding available under the program per project is $200,000, and there's a stepped match requirement that you can see up here. And this is in incremental steps. So if a full $200,000 were allocated to a project, the project would be investing $1.9 million into the neighborhood. Terms, conditions, and the default interest rate. First off, the term is 5 years. It's no interest, no payment loan that is forgivable if all conditions are met. And it's actually, we're proposing that it's forgiven in annual incremental amounts. Conditions of the program: funding is used for the eligible costs, which are construction costs relating to building and code upgrades. The project's completed within a reasonable time frame, continued operation over the term, and that the project remains in good financial standing over the term. If the project fails to meet these conditions, the default interest rate is 14%. And then we're proposing that the approval process for a project, first off, an application process and a staff review, and then once a staff determines that all program requirements are met, the application would be forwarded to the RDA Finance Committee for a review. And under the policy as proposed, the RDA Finance Committee would actually have the authority to approve the project. Under the RDA loan program, the committee can approve projects at $500,000 or under, so we felt like this kind of was in line with that standard. And that is an overview of the policy.
Questions about this policy, board members? So thorough, there isn't even a question. What do you know? Okay, or Aaron, do you have one?
Yeah, I wonder about
great.
staff's feedback on the RAC's recommendation that we broaden the accessibility of use to the zoning allowance.
Well, I think our thinking going with these 4 uses is that the adaptive reuse of buildings usually indicates you're adaptively reusing an industrial or manufacturing building for a new, more intensive use. So we were looking at those more intensive uses, but I do agree that there are some creative industries, or for example, like a commercial bakery could move in and they're contributing to the neighborhood through jobs. Maybe we don't want to exclude those type of businesses from being eligible for the program. So I can see the pluses and the drawbacks of both ways.
So do you, and I say I agree with what you're saying, we're intending for it to be the result of this use, but this financial investment, but the list there doesn't necessarily.
Yeah, it is
and
vague.
I wonder if then point D could be, that sentence itself could be adapted and we could eliminate the bullet points there and include something about the converts a vacant, underutilized, or economically challenged building into a use compliant with the current zoning allowances that supports the local economy, or I don't know, I'm wondering if there's just a way for us to get at it.
So I think the primary goal here is to convert a vacant or underutilized
space.
building into something more productive. And the secondary is to just drive additional energy into the neighborhood itself, right? So
And energy is relative, because it
Okay.
could be jobs.
it could be jobs, it could be manufacturing, it could be retail as well.
Money.
Yeah.
Residential as well.
Residential.
Right.
So what other uses are in the zoning that are not included in the list?
And is there any that you think actually we
Well-
wouldn't want to help bring that kind of business?
I think there are. So the majority of the granary district is general commercial, and that's pretty broad. So you could have items such as industrial assembly, even in that zone, medical labs, recycling collection, which might not be the type of use that we would want in the granary. A brewery, car wash, funeral homes. I mean, it's pretty broad what you can have in that zone.
I can see where what I'm trying to do here could have this unintended consequence of us supporting some business coming in that the neighborhood says, actually, no. That, I mean, sure, that can happen, but we don't want our tax increment
So
going towards
I
that.
would say the office or commercial space, which is already listed, would be, the primary use for most jobs nowadays anyway, most like service related jobs. The only thing that's missing is light manufacturing of some sort or creative production, something. I'm not sure. I mean, it depends on, what the board here wants. I would be in favor of adding to the list, if not making it just as broad as the zoning itself. What do you
Any further
I will,
discussion?
I'm going to table my,
Okay.
thanks for the conversation, but I'm okay.
I'm comfortable with what we've identified here, and we can always come back and add to it down the road if we find out. But I worry about having it so broad that we end up with something that we, as Aaron said, an unintended consequence. And I think it's a lot harder to reduce it than it is to add some things to it. So,
Madam
yes,
Chair,
yeah, Andrew.
what are we seeing right now? I mean, what's driving the desire to expand it? Are we having a lack of people being willing or able to utilize this?
The recommendation came from the Redevelopment Advisory Committee, and they really felt like maybe the example they used were like a cabinet manufacturer. They're contributing to the neighborhood through jobs and through bringing bodies through employment to the neighborhood each day. And they felt like with the list how it is, it could eliminate businesses that still would contribute to the neighborhood.
But they're not seeing specifics.
No. No, it was just
Theoretical
a
idea.
hypothetical. Mm-hmm.
Right. Is there a motion to either approve this policy or approve it with modifications or defer it?
So I move that we adopt the policy as presented by staff.
Second.
Motion by Board Member Kitchen, second by Board Member Rogers. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
It is unanimous. There we go. It is adopted as presented. And at this point, report and announcements from the Executive Director. Do you have anything? Okay, thank you. Announcements from staff? Anything? That staff? Yeah, sorry. Anything you want to add? Okay. And I kind of should have saved my thing about look at stuff in the minutes to make sure your stuff is being followed up on, but I'll say it again, just in case you didn't hear it the first time. And do we have any questions about the written briefings that were supplied to us? The Tier 1 predisposition report about the Walker Center garage, anything on that? Or the loan portfolio for January? And thank you for providing that to us as requested. We appreciate it. Okay, then that being said, we will be adjourned. And when would you like to begin?
Let's do this because we need to switch out, and I think everyone needs a break. So let's plan on starting at 4:15.
Okay.
That'll give us 15 minutes to put our council hats on. Councilmember Penfold is ill and I don't believe is going to be joining us, so I'll be chairing both the work session and the formal meeting. So let's start right at 4:15.